in the world. That was up until around 1996, when the Petronas Towers in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia surpassed our Sears Tower. Chicagoans were pretty upset about this, and we became even more upset when we realized that the only reason the Petronas Towers were considered taller than our Sears Tower is because they had a spire on the top of their buildings. Now, a spire is nothing more than a hollow tube. Okay, you can't walk around in a spire. You really can't do anything in a spire. Shouldn't be kept. So Chicagoans decided to do what we do best. We complained to the people who define what's tall and what's not. Surprisingly enough, there is a committee that meets on this and decides. It's the Council for Tall Buildings in the Urban Habitat. They exist. And we got them to create two separate categories. Now we had the world's tallest usable floor space. And the Petronas Towers had the tallest architectural top. Of course, all that would go out the window when in Taipei, Taiwan, they built the Taipei 101. Taipei got taller. Yes, oh, now you have a companion. We're both high kicking. I have nothing to say. That's very rare. I'm gonna join them next trip. Anyways, so yeah, the Petronas Towers, the Taipei 101 would top both of them. Then more recently now, you've probably all heard the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, now the tallest building in the world. No relation to Wiz Khalifa, from what I hear. But that building is something like 2,723 feet. So even if you were to go to the tip of the antennae on top of the Sears Tower there, which I do not recommend doing, that would be 1,725 feet. So still about 1,000 feet shy of that Burj Khalifa. That building is just insanely tall. And there is still a Chicago connection to the tallest building in the world. That Burj Khalifa was done by Adrian Smith, the Chicago architect, did the NBC Tower, as well as Trump's new building here in Chicago. We have this pink building off to our right. It's known just by its address as 311 South Wacker. It was done by Colin Peterson Fox in 1990. They had a unique problem of designing their building right next to the world-famous Sears Tower. So how do you outshine the Sears Tower? How do you steal some attention away from it? Well, first you clad your building in pink Texas granite. Makes it stand out a little bit. Then you make it a weird octagon-like shape. Nobody's really using the octagon to its fullest potential nowadays. But then finally, you literally outshine the Sears Tower by putting a giant steel drum on the top of your building and filling it with around 2,000 fluorescent light bulbs. So when lit up at night, it is the brightest building in our city's skyline. And originally, it was so bright that birds migrating south from Canada were altering their migratory routes, thinking it was the moon. Now, since then, the wattage on the light bulbs has been lowered. It's a little bit dimmer now, still the brightest building in our city skyline, now bird-friendly. Off in front of us, we have this white building here. If you look to the top, there's a triangular section shooting up about 13 stories taller than the rest of the building. This was done by none other than Harry Weiss and Associates, the man I mentioned who seemed to be obsessed with the triangle. Just another interesting way of incorporating triangles into his buildings here. You might notice the lobby also has sort of a triangular theme to it here as we approach. But if you look in between these two buildings, there's a nice clearing, and you get a really great view of the Sears Tower. You can see the Sears Tower from the base all the way up to the roof, giving you a really great idea just how tall the building actually is. And if you look all the way to the top, you can make out the glass balconies hanging off the sides there. It's a new observatory. You can take a step out onto those, take a look straight down. It seems pretty terrifying to me, but you might want to check it out. Now, could you imagine climbing the Sears Tower, like from the outside, climbing up it? It's been done twice. Now, the first time it was done by Dan Goodwin in 1981. The second time, more famously, was done by Alain Robert, a French daredevil by the nickname of Spider-Man. Now, he did it in 1999 without any safety riggings. No nets, no ropes, no safety harnesses whatsoever. Walked up to the building, started climbing. And he did make it all the way to the top, and he was greeted there by Chicago's finest. He was arrested for trespassing and performing an aerial show without a net. some other charges. Eventually they'll let him go, it's just a pretty heavy fine. But the Sears Tower is done in a 9-bundled tube construction. If you think of 9 sticks gathered together for strength, that's the basic idea behind it. Now, of course, each of those sticks is actually a 75 by 75 foot building, and 2 of them go to the 50th floor, 2 to the 66th, 3 to the 90th floor, then 2 all the way to the 110-story top. And with this bundled tube construction, the Sears Tower can actually sway 3 feet in either direction near the top when it's calm gale force winds. But now off to the right we have the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or the MERC for short. The 2 40-story towers are flanking what used to be the central trade floor here. It was done by Fujikawa Johnson & Associates in 1987. And they had a unique problem of designing 40,000 square feet of uninterrupted floor space in the center here for the traders do all the signaling, jumping around they tend to do. And they were worried that when they put in that trade floor with all the weight settling and pulling on the 2 towers, the towers might start to cave inward. So what they did was very slightly bowed outward the 2 towers they were constructing, just like 1/8 of an inch each floor up. So when the trade floor was put in, all that weight settled and pulled on the 2 towers, just pull them straight. And it's a unique engineering feat there. Now, but that trade floor is no longer a trade floor. The MERC merged with the Board of Trade here in Chicago a few years back. They've since renovated that space. I believe just turned it into more offices. But now we have the Civic Opera building here, as it is very clearly labeled. This is, of course, back when we spelled building with a V, I guess. Now, we do nickname this building Insol's Throne, because if you crane your neck back, you might be able to make out it's in the shape of a giant armchair or throne. And it was commissioned by a man of the name Samuel Insol, the utilities king here in the city of Chicago. Worked for Thomas Edison in his heyday. And again, the building was commissioned by Mr. Insol. He was the original owner of the building. It was actually built by Graham Anderson, Probst and White, 1929. And again, a very unfortunate time. The Great Depression was looming. And Mr. Insol would lose a lot of money, as well as his opera building here. And instead of consoling him, Chicagoans decided to make fun of him, saying that upon Mr. Insol's death, his spirit would rise up and sit on his mighty throne. So that's actually where gets the nickname of Insol's Throne from. And there are a lot of different stories out there about why the building has that throne-like shape to it. One of them says that Mr. Insol had a daughter who went to New York to try her hand at opera, and she was so bad that she got booed all the way back here to the city of Chicago. So Mr. Insol decided to build her own opera building with its back turned to New York. There's a similar story, just instead of his daughter saying it was his wife, another story saying he was upset with his downtown investors after the Great Depression hit. So he had the building built with its back turned to the downtown office buildings here in Chicago. But the more likely story, it's probably just due to a zoning ordinance. It's put in place in 1923. It's not nearly as thrilling. It said that only a quarter of your building could rise to its full height. The rest had to be at a city-ordained height. Then the lower section of the opera building there is actually where the opera stage is, so it can't support any higher floor space. That explains the whole throne-like shape to it. But now off to the right we have this red brick structure with all the ivy adorning its facade. This stands in a very historic site. It was right here in 1860 that a makeshift wooden structure known as the Wigwam was put up. Now the Wigwam was put up and taken down all within about a month, only to house one convention, the Republican National Convention of 1860, where we nominated Illinois' own Abraham Lincoln to run for president that year. So a pretty historic spot there. Good old Honest Abe was nominated. Then we have this building with a big curved glass front to it here. It's known just by its address as 333 West Wacker, kind of like 311 South Wacker. Some of their addresses, both Tom Peterson Fox buildings. But 333 West Wacker is another post-modern building. Again, postmodernism, known for its contextualism, or just paying tribute to its location. Here you have alternating shades of green glass reflecting the green of the river, the big curve to the front of the building referencing the big bend in the river here, as well as some circular vents near the base of the building, just meant to reflect portholes on a ship. So again, just paying tribute to its location here on the Chicago River. And this building is also thought to reflect that Chicago school of architecture, that tripartite or 3-part design. Here you have the stone base, the curved glass shaft, and the capital at the top is where the building actually changes its shape. It does sort of a trapezoid-like thing up top there. Has to come in line with the city's grid. Now, right next door, Com Peterson Fox will also do this building, 225 West Wacker. Again, just going by its address, and again having a circular vent in the front, as well as some circular windows along the sides, reflecting portholes on a ship. I'd like to mention the central section of windows here, because they're separated by these spandrels that have 4 rivets in a square. Why decorate your building with rivets? That seems like an odd decorating choice. But all you have to do for your answer, for the one of many Chicago bridges, all the rivets on them. Again, this is what postmodernism is all about, just paying tribute to your surroundings. And Chicago is actually known for having the most movable bridges of any city in the world. At one time we had around 52 movable bridges. Now we're down to about 36. They're all still fully functional, still go up and down whenever need be. And it's still far more than any other city in the world. So again, the most movable bridges here, Chicago. And you mostly just see them going up and down on Wednesdays and Saturdays, certain times of the year. The weather starts to warm up, all the sailboats head out onto the lake. Then when it starts to cool down, they all head back down the river. They set aside these 2 days a week for bridge openings for sailboats come through. Coming up on the other side of this bridge, we'll have what was known as the Builders Building. It was done in the 1920s by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. You might notice the nice annex put on the side here with the big bay windows sticking out. This building was renovated in the 1980s by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill. They threw on that annex there. I like to point it out because it makes a lot of references to the original structure, kind of paying tribute to or blending in with the original design. Yeah, but that still stands out in its own right with those big bay windows sticking out there. Next door we have the LaSalle Wacker building. This is the remnants of that old city ordinance I mentioned really briefly. See, in 1923, city officials thought they were scientists. They came up with this idea known as the canyon effect. Went something like this. They said if buildings here in Chicago kept rising so tall, eventually they would block out all the sunlight and the air to the streets below, slowly transforming Chicagoans into a race of mole people, scurrying about in the streets beneath. I tacked on that last bit myself. But they did say that only a quarter of your building could rise to its full height. The rest had to be at a city-ordained height to make way for the sunlight and air down the streets below. That ordinance has long since been thrown out. In case you're wondering what a Greek temple might look like if you were to stretch it to 50 stories tall, Ricardo Bofield has your answer. It was 77 West Wacker. It was originally the R.R. Donnelly building. I believe now home to United Airlines. There's that United sign up at the top. But I mentioned this building mainly because of how beautiful it looks at night. I see as the night sky turns black, most of the windows in this building will also turn black. Then all those columns are lit up. So you just get this view of a giant Greek temple going up in the night sky there. It's a pretty great view late at night. A couple doors down, we have this tall plaid-looking building here, 35 West Wacker, home to the Leo Burnett advertising agency, called the Leo Burnett Building. This represents another idea in postmodernism, to just take a small piece of architecture, put it on a broader scale, this time taking the classical column and expanding upon it. You know, it's the entire building with like some giant column standing there, reflecting the base of the building with all the columns there surrounding the base. Then if you look off in front of us, past Morton's, the steakhouse, there's that green building with all the gold leafing at the top. It's supposed to look like a giant champagne bottle. It was done by the Burnham brothers back in the Prohibition years, back when alcohol was banned here in the United States. They're said to have been missing their champagne bottles. It was originally the Carbide and Carbon building, I believe now home to the Hard Rock Hotel. Now as we clear State Street Bridge, I'll pull your attention to the ground level. It's coming up off to the right, we do have Chicago Remembers. This is the largest Vietnam War memorial outside of Washington, D.C. It is right here now, straight off to the right. Then the building above it, the one with a dome in each corner, then the big center dome, was originally known as the Jewelers Building. It was done in 1926. The 1920s were a fairly rough and tumble time here in the city of Chicago, and people were concerned for the jewelers' safety. So that building was actually designed with a car elevator, so the jewelers could drive right into the building, and this elevator would lift them to their floor, so they could safely unload all the very precious merchandise. And all this safety came into question when I learned that on the 40th floor in that big center dome there, none other than the notorious Chicago gangster, a Mr. Al Capone, was said to be running a speakeasy in those days called the Stratosphere Lounge. So yeah, gangsters up top, the jewelers down below. I'm sure it was all perfectly safe. But now we have this Hotel 71 here. You might notice a very slender white building that's attached to it. That is actually a separate building. It's known as Mather Tower. I pointed out because Mather Tower was the tallest building here in the city of Chicago. for just 1 week. We were going through a pretty big building boom at the time. That building was topped off and the tallest. Then a week later, another building was a little bit taller. We do go through these building booms from time to time. Went through one, we got the Sears Tower, the Aon Center, as well as the John Hancock Center, all within a few years of each other. 3 of the tallest buildings as they stand here in Chicago today. And up until recently, we were going through one with Trump's building going up there. We'll see Aqua up here in a minute, and a bunch of other condos and office buildings going up around here the last few years. That's kind of slowed down lately, though. But now, if you remember that Chicago Tribune Tower contest, the winners will be coming up off the left here, Howells and Hood with the Tribune Tower. But then directly across the way, the first building that's on the other side of Michigan Avenue here is 333 North Michigan Avenue. This building actually pays tribute to the second place design, that Tribune Tower contest. Second place design was done by Alil Saarinen. His building was never actually built, but he did publish his design idea. When people around the city here saw this design, they realized that this was going to be the future of architecture. Alil Saarinen actually helped spread the Art Deco movement here in Chicago in the 1920s. So just a unique set of circumstances. Even though he was the runner-up in that Tribune Tower contest, his design ended up having more influence on architecture here. That building was put up a few years after the design competition just to pay tribute to his second-place design. Going off to the left, in between buildings, get a quick glimpse of the John Hancock Center here. It's one big X's running up its frame, 2 antennae shooting out the top. If you missed it the first time, get a more prolonged view of it here in just a moment. It is the 4th tallest building standing here in Chicago, 1,127 feet to the roof, just 9 feet shy of the Aon Center, which is the 3rd tallest. And here it comes again now. Now, even though that is the 4th tallest building standing here in Chicago, they say you get the best views of Chicago from the John Hancock Center. And more specifically, they say that the best view is if you go to the 96th floor, the Signature Room Lounge, and you take a look out the window of the women's washroom. Now, I personally have never been. But it appears to me that everyone who has been there seems to agree. It is indeed the best view of the city of Chicago. And from what I hear, they will occasionally invite gentlemen in. Take a quick view out the window there, so it's not a terribly private washroom. But you might want to check it out if you have some spare time. I guess you get a pretty great view of the city. Coming up off to the right, we have this large triangular building standing here. You might be able to guess who it was done by. None other than Harry Weiss and Associates, the man obsessed with the triangle. This is home to the Swiss Hotel, a fine hotel and establishment, I'm sure. Harry Weiss actually did 2 triangular buildings here in the city of Chicago. This is one of them, the Swiss Hotel. And the other one, we don't get a really good view of from the river. But it is clad in stone, and it has very narrow windows. It's actually home to our Federal Correctional Facility in the area. Now, I have not spent the night at either one of Harry Weiss's triangular buildings. I can't really compare the accommodations.